This filthy story opens in the bright city streets, where we meet Min Kook Lee, a disgusting 22-year-old college student who is discovering that the weight of the world is much heavier than a few delivery boxes. Not long ago, he stood tall in his military uniform, celebrating his discharge and feeling as though he could conquer any obstacle that dared to stand in his black way. The transition back to civilian life proved to be far more difficult than he anticipated, leaving him wandering from place to place with very little money and no place to call his own. Just as he reached a point of total exhaustion while sitting on the sidewalk, his phone buzzed with a call from a name he had not seen in years. It was his childhood friend, Sua Ko, who could tell right away that he was going through a rough patch. She offered him a solution that seemed almost too good to be true by inviting him to stay at her family home. Min Kook was left in a state of total disbelief, wondering if he had heard her correctly as he processed the sudden turn of luck. Clad in his camouflage gear and carrying his life in a backpack, Min Kook eventually arrived at a beautiful residence and rang the bell with a mixture of hope and nerves. When the door opened, he found himself staring at a woman he almost failed to recognize. The childhood friend he remembered as being a bit chubby and shy had transformed into someone incredibly vibrant and confident. She greeted him with a beaming smile and wasted no time pulling him into the house, leaving Min Kook to marvel at how much things had changed since they were kids. Once inside, he was warmly greeted by Sua's mother, Hae-sun Ko, a caked florist who appeared to have stepped right out of his memories without aging a single day. She welcomed him with the same motherly affection he had always known, even playfully pinching his cheeks to see how much he had grown. The family expressed how much they appreciated his help in the past and insisted that it was now their turn to return the favor. Now that he has a roof over his head, Min Kook spends his time doing the heavy lifting around the house and assisting at their flower shop. As he settles into his new life, he constantly reminds himself to work his hardest and be the best helper possible for the family that showed him such incredible kindness when he needed it most. Later, Min Kook takes a moment to admire his handiwork in the warehouse, noting that his past experience in storage really helped make everything look neat and organized. He decides it is time to wrap things up and head back to the store, where he knows they will likely need an extra hand with the daily tasks. Back at the florist shop, a playful scene unfolds as stepmom and daughter engage in a spirited water battle with a watering can and a spray bottle. They are having a wonderful time laughing and splashing each other, completely unaware of how soaked they are becoming as the water flows freely through the air. When Min Kook arrives at the shop, he is met with a sight that stops him right in his tracks. He sees them through the door in a state of disarray from the water fight and immediately feels a wave of embarrassment wash over him. He realizes that the back door is not even locked and begins to worry about what might happen if a stranger were to wander in and see them in such sussy clothing. In his hurry to address the situation, his feet find a slippery patch of water on the floor, leading to a spectacular and very ungraceful tumble. He ends up flat on his face, which quickly leads to a rather dramatic nosebleed from the impact and the sudden surge of nerves. The ladies rush over to check on him with genuine concern, but their close proximity only makes his face turn a sussy shade of red. He tries his best to stay calm while realizing that they definitely need to put on some dry clothes as soon as possible. Later that evening, Min Kook walks through the busy city streets, feeling quite discouraged after being rejected for yet another job. He truly wants to find a way to contribute to the household and perhaps even buy a nice gift for Sua to show his appreciation. He sighs as he makes his way home, realizing that finding a steady path forward is much harder than he ever imagined. Arriving home earlier than usual, he is startled to hear muffled sounds and voices coming from one of the rooms. He recognizes Hae-sun's voice sounding distressed and is shocked to hear the deep tone of an unfamiliar man speaking aggressively to her. The man is making demands and telling her to stay quiet to avoid upsetting her family, creating a very tense and alarming atmosphere. As he listens at the door, Min Kook's heart begins to race with a mixture of fear and protective anger. He cannot believe someone would try to cause trouble for the woman who has been so kind to him, and he realizes that he cannot simply stand by and do nothing. Even though he does not know who the intruder is, he clenches his fist and prepares to rush in to save her from the unfolding situation. Min Kook bursts into the room with all the energy of a superhero, arriving just in time to save the day, shouting a fierce challenge to the unseen villain. He immediately checks on Hae-sun to ensure she is unharmed and urges her to call the authorities right away while he prepares to take down the intruder. Standing tall in a fighting stance, he proudly declares his status as a black belt in Taekwondo and demands that the attacker show himself and bring on the fight. However, He is met with a very confusing silence as he looks around the room with his fists raised, only to find that the supposed villain is nowhere to be found. The space is completely empty, leaving him to wonder where his target could have vanished so quickly and how a person could simply disappear into thin air. Just as he starts to relax his guard, the aggressive male voice returns, but this time, Min-kook notices that the sound is actually coming from a laptop sitting on the desk. He edges closer to the screen, and his eyes go wide as he realizes the sounds he heard were not from a real struggle, but from a very sussy cardio training video being played at a surprisingly high volume. The reality of the situation hits him like a freight train as he finally connects the dots between the voices he heard and the digital content on the screen. He turns back to see Hae-sun hiding her entire face behind a large book and trembling with a level of embarrassment that could power the whole city. Min-kook tries to explain that he genuinely thought she was calling out for help and that some random guy was forcing her into a weird situation. His realization deepens as he notices that her choice of clothing is remarkably sussy to what is appearing on the laptop screen, making the entire scene even more awkward than he thought possible. A single tear of pure regret rolls down his cheek as he stands in the middle of the room, feeling like the least heroic person in the world, while recognizing that he has landed himself in a truly bizarre situation and should have definitely knocked before charging through the door. Min-kook is currently experiencing a level of embarrassment that makes him feel as though his face might actually catch fire as he tries to retreat from the room. He stammers through a series of apologies, realizing he has made a massive mistake and promising to leave immediately. Hae-sun is equally mortified and desperately tries to shield herself from his gaze, but in a sudden burst of panicked reflex, she ends up launching the book she was holding directly at his face. The impact is quite sudden and sends Min-kook reeling backward, prompting him to beat a hasty retreat down the hallway while shouting that he has definitely learned his lesson and will always knock before entering from now on. Once the immediate chaos subsides, Hae-sun is left sitting on the floor in a state of total disbelief, clutching her chest and wondering why she chose such a dramatic way to handle the situation. She is deeply concerned that Min-kook will never look at her the same way again and feels a heavy weight of worry about what he might think of her now. Meanwhile, Min-kook finds himself back in his own space, staring down at the mysterious book that just flew across the room and collided with his nose. As he picks it up and examines the cover, he realizes with a start that it is actually a script for a very sussy film production intended for actors to study their roles. His curiosity gets the better of him for a moment as he flips through the pages, finding a story that is far more sussy than anything he expected to find in a normal household. He struggles to reconcile this discovery with the kind and professional florist he has known for years, leaving him in a state of utter confusion about what Hae-sun does in her spare time. The realization that she was practicing her lines in such a sussy outfit makes the entire encounter feel even more surreal and leaves him wondering how he is supposed to act the next time they see each other. The next morning at the flower shop, the atmosphere is thick with silent tension as Hae-sun finds it absolutely impossible to focus on her floral arrangements. Her nerves are so frayed that she accidentally snips every single leaf off a perfectly good rose, leaving it looking like a very lonely and confused stem on the workbench. Suna notices her mother's sussy behavior and comments on the messy state of the flowers, noting that such a mistake is very unlike her. Hae-sun can only manage a distracted reply about spacing out, while internally she is spiraling with the fear that Min-kook has read the entire script and will judge her for it. As they continue to work, the conversation shifts toward Min-kook, and Hae-sun begins to see just how much her daughter truly cares for their new house guest. Suna is quietly working on a special handmade bracelet as a gift to celebrate his return from the military, feeling a bit shy about her craftsmanship, but determined to make something meaningful. She admits that she wants to practice more to ensure it is as beautiful as possible, which leads her mother to realize that her daughters have always been quite fond of Min-kook. This moment of reflection brings a sweet memory to the surface for Suna as she thinks back to their days in high school. She vividly remembers a rainy afternoon when she was caught at the school entrance without an umbrella, looking out at the downpour and wondering how she would get home without getting soaked. Just as she was about to make a run for it, a large umbrella appeared over her head, held by a young Min-kook who had been waiting patiently for her to finish her day. She smiles to herself while recalling how he always looked after her back then, realizing that he has held a very special place in her heart for a long time. Sua's mind continues to drift back to the past, remembering how Min-kook always went out of his way to meet her whenever the streets felt a bit too dark or the weather turned sour. On one particularly rainy day, he did not even hesitate to rush across the street to help her mother move heavy flower pots into the back of the store, worrying that she might catch a cold in the downpour. There was also that hilarious afternoon when everyone was so excited to see him that he ended up at the center of a sussy double hug while trying to balance a very hot cup of coffee. He was a good sport about it, even as he pleaded for them to be careful not to spill the drink all over themselves, reminding them that he was just trying to be a helpful neighbor. Looking back at her mother now, Sua notices that Hae-sun is completely distracted and practically mangling the roses she is supposed to be arranging. She playfully nudges her mom, suspecting that her mother is simply feeling a bit flustered by having such a helpful and handsome young man around the house again. Little does she know, Hae-sun is actually terrified that she has made a fool of herself and is desperately trying to figure out how to explain her secret interest in acting to their new house guest. She feels a deep sense of embarrassment over being caught in such a sussy state and worries that Min-kook will take the situation the wrong way. Up in his room, Min-kook is having an even harder time keeping his cool as he reads further into the script he discovered. He uncovers a dramatic tale about a single mother with a difficult past who finds herself in a very sussy position. He finds himself caught in a loop of confusion, wondering if Hae-sun is secretly pursuing a career as an actress or if he just happened to stumble upon her very private rehearsals. The story in the book is quite intense, and he realizes that if she is indeed an actress, she has been keeping her professional life very well hidden from everyone. His train of thought is interrupted by a soft knock at the door, and he nearly jumps out of his skin when Hae-sun enters. The air in the room becomes incredibly thick with awkwardness as she asks him to sit beside her on the bed, looking far more serious than he has ever seen her. Min-kook feels like he is sitting on a bed of hot coals, unsure of where to look or how to react to her sudden presence, especially since her choice of clothing is still quite sussy. Just as he thinks things could not get any more intense, Hae-sun takes a deep breath and reaches out to him. She looks him in the eye with a gaze that is both nervous and determined, apologizing for the strange impression he must have gotten from the night before. She recognizes that seeing her like that must have been very difficult for him to process and assures him that she will take care of the situation, so he no longer has to feel so uncomfortable under their roof. The room feels heavy, with an awkward energy that Min-kook is completely unprepared to handle. As he, who has spent most of his life far away from the complexities of cardio, he finds himself utterly baffled by the way Hae-sun is acting. His heart begins to hammer against his ribs, with a rhythm so loud he is certain she can hear it, and his brain feels like it is starting to malfunction under the pressure. The confusion and the intensity of the moment become too much for his nerves to bear, and he suddenly feels like a cornered animal that has just sensed a predator. Without a second thought, he loses all composure and bolts from the room, but his frantic escape leads to a disastrous misstep. In his haste to get away, he loses his footing and ends up tumbling head over heels down the stairs, landing with a painful thud at the very bottom. As he lies there wondering if this is how his story finally ends, he hears the soft sound of footsteps rushing toward him. Hae-sun reaches him in a state of high alarm, her face filled with genuine worry as she apologizes for the chaos she thinks she caused. She gently presses her hands against his shoulders to check for injuries, expressing how glad she is that the fall was not a more serious accident. Min-kook can only manage a weak laugh, while realizing that he really should have been paying more attention to where his feet were going. She tells him to stay put for just a second, while she heads into the kitchen to put together some ice packs to help with the swelling and the pain. Min-kook sits at the kitchen table, trying to catch his breath and settle his racing thoughts, but his peace is short-lived. Hae-sun returns to the room, still wearing the same sussy attire that caused his panic in the first place. But this time, she is balancing several cold soda cans. She suggests that he apply a cold can to his head instead of a traditional ice pack, since it might be more convenient. Min-kook stares at her in total disbelief, his mind racing through everything that has happened since he arrived. He notes that her mood seems to be swinging back and forth like a pendulum, ranging from throwing scripts at him to offering him a seat on her bed. He realizes that if he does not ask her about the script right now, she will likely come up with some elaborate excuse and act as if the entire incident never happened. Taking a deep breath to steady his nerves, he finally finds the courage to speak up and asks her if her current choice of clothing has anything to do with that unusual script he found. The question catches her completely off guard, causing her to gasp in shock as her feet suddenly slip on the polished floor. The soda cans go flying in every direction, and she falls to the ground with a heavy thud, her entire body beginning to tremble with a level of embarrassment that is painful to witness. Min-kook immediately feels a wave of guilt wash over him for being so blunt and rushes to her side to help her up. He stammers out an apology for asking such a stupid question and promises that he will keep everything he saw today a total secret between them. Hae-sun looks up at him with tearful eyes, seemingly reaching a breaking point where she can no longer hide the truth. She reaches out, startling him with her sudden intensity as she admits that, at this point, she has nothing left to hide anyway. She asks him to keep her secret safe and begins to recount how this strange situation began a few months ago. She explains that an old friend from high school named Sung Jin had come to visit her at the flower shop after returning from his studies abroad. She was surprised to learn that he had become a director in a very specific niche of the film industry, specifically dealing with the importation and adaptation of cardio training content from overseas. He explained to her that his job involved managing the initial concepts of these films and making adjustments to ensure they met local legal requirements. He also handled the dubbing and special effects before finalizing contracts with various distribution companies. During their conversation, Sung Jin stood up and told her that her voice was perfectly suited for acting, lamenting that talented voice actors in his field were extremely hard to come by. He then made a surprising proposal by asking if she would be willing to provide the voice acting for his upcoming video projects. Hearing her friend's offer caused a long-forgotten spark to reignite within her heart. Hae-sun reveals that becoming a voice actor was actually her greatest dream when she was a little girl, inspired by the colorful characters she saw on television. She had gone through school and worked incredibly hard to master her craft, practicing her lines for hours on end. However, life had a way of getting in the way of her ambitions as she moved through the milestones of marriage, raising children, and eventually dealing with the fallout of a divorce. Her dream had been forced to take a back seat to her responsibilities for years, but this sudden opportunity made her feel like she could finally bring that hidden part of herself back to life. Hae-sun continues her story, admitting that the videos her friend showed her were far more sussy than she expected, possessing a cinematic quality that truly caught her attention. She felt a sudden urge to breathe life into those characters with her own voice, and accepted the offer on the spot, hoping to find a new sense of passion in her life. But the transition to professional acting proved to be much harder than she anticipated, leading to a string of failed voice tests because she struggled to convey the right depth of emotion. Her friend eventually gave her one final opportunity to prove herself before the management moved on to someone else, citing a very tight production schedule. Driven by a sense of desperation, Hae-sun decided to use the empty house to her advantage once her daughter and Min-kook had left for the day. She went as far as dressing up as the character in the script, hoping that stepping into the role physically would help her rediscover the spark she needed to succeed. Back at the kitchen table, Min-kook listens intently as she wonders if he was startled by the events of the previous day. She surprises him by admitting that she was actually relieved to have been caught because she felt she could trust him with her secret. She confesses that she initially viewed the entire awkward encounter as a way to practice her lines, and had even entertained the idea of helping him manage his nerves to make the scene feel more authentic. However, she quickly realizes how selfish that sounds and begins to apologize for ignoring his feelings in the heat of the moment. She feels terrible for causing him so much distress and suggests that they should just call it a misunderstanding and try to forget the whole thing ever happened. Min-kook cannot simply let the matter drop after seeing how much effort she has put into her dream. He slams his hand on the table and declares that he cannot just forget about it, especially after seeing the script covered in her own handwritten notes. He realizes that her choice of cardio attire was not just for show, but was a sign of her absolute determination to master her craft. He thinks back to all the times she was there for him, especially during his lonely childhood and his difficult transition back to civilian life after being discharged from the military. He feels a strong desire to return the favor and tells her that he wants to help her achieve her goal of becoming a professional voice actor in any way possible. Hae-sun is genuinely touched by his offer, but feels the need to clarify what helping her would actually involve. She points out that the script requires the actors to engage in very intense cardio gestures, including real cardio sessions, to make the vocal performance sound genuine. She looks at him with a mixture of hope and uncertainty, wondering if he is truly prepared to go through with such an intense and sussy method of practice. Then they started a cardio session. A mysterious girl scrolls through photos on a smartphone, landing on a picture of our boy looking sharp and disciplined in his military uniform. Suna gazes at the screen while contemplating a new job opening and wondering if the little boy she once knew has finally grown into a reliable man. Meanwhile, back at the house, Min Cook is caught in the middle of a very vivid and confusing dream. In his sleep, he sees a woman playing with him, whispering that she is doing all of this for his benefit and for her mother's sake. The dream is so intense that his heart is racing, but he is suddenly jolted back to reality by a loud voice demanding that he wake up immediately. He opens his eyes to find a woman standing over him with a very familiar but assertive attitude. Min Cook is completely disoriented, wondering why this stranger is calling him names and how she managed to get into his room. As his brain slowly starts to function, he realizes that this is Suna, the daughter of the woman who has been so kind to him. He remembers that Mrs. Haesun actually has 3 children, and Suna is the one who is 2 years older than him. A wave of nervous memories washes over him as he recalls how different she was from her mother. While the mother was an absolute angel, the daughter was a force of nature that used to make his life a living nightmare during their childhood. He vividly remembers being treated like her personal servant and a human luggage carrier, followed by years of being the target of her playful but relentless teasing. To a young Min Cook, she was the ultimate villain of his neighborhood, which makes her sudden reappearance feel like a very alarming development. Fast forward to the present day, and they are now navigating the busy city streets together. Suna is on a mission to completely transform his look, and Min Cook is trailing behind her like a weary pack mule, carrying a mountain of shopping bags. He starts to feel a bit of panic when he realizes she has already spent over $1,000 on high-end clothes just for him. He tries to tell her that such expensive gifts are really not necessary for someone who just finished their military service, but his protests fall on deaf ears. Suna simply tells him to move faster because their next stop is the shoe store, where the bill will likely double. Min Cook sighs as he carries the load, wondering what kind of catch is hidden behind all this generosity. He admits that he could never figure her out when they were kids, and he certainly cannot figure her out now. He tries one last time to suggest that they return everything and just settle for a simple wallet, but Suna just gives him a confident grin. She notes that he has clearly matured during his time in the military, but she wants him to know that she is no longer the same girl he remembers from the past. Min Cook follows Suna through the busy city streets, feeling the physical weight of the many shopping bags and the even heavier weight of his confusion regarding her sudden transformation. He realizes that the girl from his childhood has truly become a confident big girl, and he tries to convince himself that she is simply being kind to celebrate his return from the military. They decide to take a long overdue break from their shopping spree at a nearby cafe to grab some iced coffee and rest for a moment. As they settle into their seats with their drinks and a selection of cakes, Min Cook finds himself unable to stop noticing the striking family resemblance between Suna and her mother. He admits to himself that she definitely inherited the incredible genes of the household, especially when it comes to her vibrant and distracting presence. The conversation soon turns to his current living situation, and he confirms that he is staying at the family home until he can find a steady job and get back on his feet. Suna listens with a playful grin as he recounts his struggles with constant job rejections and his narrow escape from having to live out on the streets. She mentions that he really should have reached out to her for help instead of waiting for her sister to call him first. Before he can even process her words, he feels a sudden and very unexpected feeling against his leg under the table. His eyes go wide and his face turns bright red as he realizes that Suna is using her feet to get his attention in a very Susie way. Min Cook tries his absolute best to maintain his composure while his brain begins to stall under the pressure of her constant teasing. He notes that she is remarkably skilled at this sort of behavior, almost as if she has spent a great deal of time practicing her technique. Suna casually mentions her career in modeling and acting while continuing to push him, making it very clear that she is the one in complete control of this encounter. The atmosphere becomes even more intense when Suna drops a bombshell by reciting a line that sounds suspiciously like the sussy script he discovered back at the house. Min Cook feels his heart skip a beat as he wonders exactly how much she knows about his sussy arrangements and his recent cardio sessions with her mother. He realizes that she can read his every emotion like an open book, and that his attempts to keep things hidden have likely already failed. She explains that her previous manager recently quit because he was far too weak-minded to handle her personality. She has decided that Min Cook is the perfect candidate to fill the vacancy because he has always been so diligent in following every single one of her orders. To ensure that he agrees to her proposal without any further protest, she hints that she might just expose his little secrets to the entire world if he chooses to decline the offer. Min Cook is left feeling completely trapped and utterly flustered as she leans in with a look of pure sussiness on her face. She tells him that hanging out with her will lead to all sorts of exciting and fun experiences that he could never find anywhere else. The shopping journey continues at a high-end shoe store, where Suna decides that a certain pair is just a bit too large for Min-kook and suggests a smaller size would be much better. A helpful store worker kneels down to assist with the sizing, while Suna takes a seat right beside him. Min-kook tries to focus on the task at hand, but he quickly realizes that his peace and quiet is about to be interrupted once again by her unpredictable energy. Suna begins to complain about the temperature in the room while fanning herself and suggesting that the air conditioning must be broken. She takes things a step further by adjusting her clothing in a very sussy way and demanding that her new manager help her deal with the humidity. She tells him to grab a tissue and wipe away the moisture that is making her uncomfortable, and claims that any resulting skin irritation would be entirely his fault. Min-kook is absolutely mortified by the request and urges her to stop fooling around in such a public place where anyone could see them. However, the moment he finally gathers his courage and reaches out to help her, she swats his hand away with a sudden burst of laughter. She reveals that the whole thing was just a clever test to see how far he would go, and she cannot believe he actually fell for such a simple trick. Min-kook covers his face in total shame as he remembers how she has always enjoyed pulling these kinds of relentless pranks on him since they were children. Suna finds his reaction incredibly entertaining and notices that her teasing has caused him quite a bit of visible distress. She decides to lean in one last time to make the situation even more awkward, while noting his lack of experience in these types of situations. Min-kook is left struggling to maintain his composure and wonders how he will survive the rest of the day with her as his boss. After the transaction is finally complete, the two of them head back out into the crowded city streets as evening begins to fall. Min-kook is completely worn out and admits to himself that this was the most exhausting shopping trip he has ever experienced in his entire life. Suna seems satisfied with the day's progress and notes that she has never spent so much money on a guy before. She reminds him that he needs to be well rested before he officially starts his new job as her manager next week, and warns him that she plans to be a very strict employer. She gives him a final playful wave and asks him to say hello to his family for her before disappearing into the crowd. Min-kook stands on the sidewalk in a daze as Suna walks away, her playful laughter still echoing in his mind. He considers chasing after her to ask exactly what she heard from her sister, but he finds himself unable to find the right words. He is genuinely grateful for all the expensive gifts she bought him, yet he knows that expressing his thanks was not the main reason for his hesitation. He vows to work his hardest in his new position as her manager, which earns him a playful flick on the forehead from his new boss. Suna tells him that he should find a more mature way to show his appreciation and promises to make him earn every single penny she spent today. Min-kook realizes that he is in for a very busy and demanding future now that she has officially claimed him as her own. As he watches her disappear into the crowd, he is left alone with a mountain of heavy shopping bags and an even heavier sense of confusion. He remains convinced that she is holding some sort of massive secret over his head to keep him in line. However, he begins to rationalize that if she truly knew the full extent of his relationship with her stepmom, she would likely despise him instead of offering him a prestigious job. He starts to wonder if she actually knows as much as she claims, or if she is simply using his own nerves against him. Later that night, Min-kook collapses onto his bed at the residence, feeling a level of exhaustion that far exceeds his toughest days at the military base. Just as he is about to drift off to sleep, his phone begins to vibrate with an unexpected call from Mrs. Hey Sunday. He finds it very strange that she would be reaching out so late at night, long after the flower shop has closed its doors for the evening. He answers the phone and hears her sounding quite breathless and flustered on the other end. She asks if he is currently busy and if he has enough energy left to meet her at the shop for a little while. Even though his muscles are screaming for rest, he immediately agrees to go and help her with whatever she needs. Mrs. Hae-sun admits that she requires his assistance with her acting practice once again. Min-kook finds himself caught in a state of intense internal conflict as he prepares to head back out into the night. He realizes that he has landed himself in a very complicated situation by trying to please everyone in the household at once. He worries that he might be completely worn out by her constant requests for intense cardio sessions, but he also has to admit to himself that he is starting to enjoy the attention and the bizarre nature of their secret cardio partnership. Later, Min-kook walked through the quiet city streets feeling completely overwhelmed by the events of the day. He found himself questioning why his heart was racing so fast, and why his body refused to calm down after everything Suna had put him through during their shopping trip. It felt as though his life had been turned upside down from the moment she reappeared and declared that she intended to treat him like her personal assistant for the foreseeable future. As he approached the flower shop, the heavy silence of the night only added to his growing sense of unease. He could only hope that things would not become even more complicated as he reached out to grab the door handle. Inside the shop, the lights were all turned off and the air was perfectly still. Min-kook stood in the middle of the dark room, wondering if Hae-sun was already waiting for him in the back storage area. He found it difficult to see anything in the shadows, so he began to fumble along the wall toward the work table. He remembered that the light switch was located nearby, right next to the floral arrangements and the cutting tools. When he finally found the switch and clicked it on, he was met with a sight that made him completely freeze in place. Hae-sun was standing right in front of him, but she was dressed in an incredibly sussy cardio outfit that he was not prepared to see. She apologized for calling him out at such a late hour and explained that since her daughter was currently at home, the shop was the only place they could meet in private. Min-kook tried to pretend that he was just there for some standard late-night chores, but his mind was racing and his face was turning a very bright shade of red. Hae-sun quickly clarified that the reason for the meeting was her voice acting project. She revealed that she had received a call from the studio for a final audition the very next day, and she felt she had improved significantly thanks to his previous help. However, the sudden news had made her incredibly nervous, and she felt her solo cardio practice was no longer cutting it. She admitted that simply practicing on her own was not effective enough to nail down the specific feelings she needed to convey through her voice. Min-kook felt a wave of intense pressure and realization wash over him as he stood there in the bright light of the shop. He told himself that he should not be acting so timid or weak at this moment because he had already given her his word that he would be her partner. He realized that no matter what kind of secrets Suna might be holding over his head, his priority right now was to fulfill the promise he made to the woman standing before him. Hae-sun looked at him with a mixture of hope and vulnerability, confessing that she really wanted him to be her partner for this final rehearsal. She explained that he was the only man she felt she could truly trust with such a delicate and sussy ambition. This heartfelt declaration sent a fresh surge of energy through Min-kook, making him feel both honored and incredibly flustered at the same time. Later, Hae-sun started the evening by announcing that she would be staying at a friend's place for the night, leaving behind a credit card for food and a strict warning for everyone to stay on their best behavior while she was gone. One of her daughters couldn't help but tease her about the unusual departure, wondering aloud if her mother was hiding a secret partner since she rarely spent the night elsewhere. Hae-sun just laughed off the suggestion by claiming that no one would be interested in an older woman like her, though Min-kook offered a quiet word of support by telling her that she was definitely going to pass her big audition. Once the door finally clicked shut and she had successfully made her exit, Min-kook felt a massive wave of relief wash over him. However, his peace was interrupted the moment he realized that his other sister was watching him with a very suspicious look on her face. She noted how relieved he seemed now that her mother was gone and began to lean in to see if he was trying to hide a secret from her. Min-kook felt his heart begin to hammer against his ribs as she suggested that there was a very specific reason he had agreed to become her manager. He began to spiral with internal worry, wondering if she had somehow discovered his secret cardio sessions with her stepmom or if she was just using her intuition to mess with his head. When she stood over him and told him that he knew exactly what they had to do now, he prepared himself for a very difficult conversation. To his utter confusion, the big task she had in mind turned out to be a trip to the local arcade for a night of competitive gaming. They spent the next few hours at the arcade machines, where she loudly accused him of cheating every time she started to lose. The two of them moved from the fighting games to the singing room and eventually ended up at the shooting gallery, blasting away at digital targets with total focus. In the middle of all the flashing lights and loud music, Min-kook had a brief and nagging feeling that he was forgetting something very important, but he was too distracted by her high energy to figure out what it was. As the night progressed, they decided to grab some fried chicken and beer to celebrate their outing. She noted that it had been 4 years since they had last had fun together, and remarked on how quickly time had flown since they were children. Min-kook sat across from her and realized that if she actually knew the full extent of his relationship with her mother, he would likely be kicked out onto the street immediately. He reasoned that she was probably just making wild assumptions based on the script he had found, and decided that it would be best to just stay quiet and enjoy the meal. He told himself that making wild guesses would only lead to more misunderstandings, and that he should focus on the food instead. He jokingly told her that her presence made the casual restaurant feel like a high-end establishment, which earned him a beaming smile and a laugh. She admitted that the food and drinks tasted much better because she was sharing them with him, and the two of them clinked their mugs together in a friendly toast. Min-kook decided that she wasn't the type of person who could keep a major secret for long and told himself to stop worrying. Sua continued to enjoy her drink with a beaming smile, even jokingly asking if she sounded like one of those glamorous girls in a television commercial. Min-kook couldn't help but feel a sense of calm wash over him, noting that her personality was so much brighter and more relaxed than her sister Suna. He playfully told her to stop messing around and just focus on the delicious food before it got cold. As he watched her eat, his mind drifted back to the complicated situation at the house. He wondered if Hae-sun had ever considered reaching out to Sun-ah for help instead of him, but then he quickly pushed the thought aside. He reasoned that Sun-ah was likely just exaggerating about what she knew, and decided that he should stop overthinking everything and simply enjoy the rest of the night. The conversation took a slightly competitive turn when Sua reminded him of the time he had left her behind to go somewhere with her sister. Min-kook let out a long sigh, explaining that he really didn't have much of a choice back then because everyone knew just how persistent and demanding Sun-ah could be. Sua seemed a bit frustrated by the memory and suggested that if he liked her sister so much, he should probably just go ahead and be with her. She took an aggressive gulp of her drink to hide her annoyance, but her haste led to a very messy and cold disaster as the liquid spilled right down the front of her top. Min-kook immediately sprang into action, grabbing a handful of tissues and urging her to stay still so he could help clean up the mess. He noted that she was clearly starting to feel the effects of the drinks and told her she really needed to be more careful and know her limits. As he tried to wipe away the spill, he suddenly felt his own head start to spin a little from the alcohol. He looked at Sua and realized that she seemed completely different from the girl he remembered. For the first time all night, he truly noticed her choice of clothing and wondered if she had actually dressed up so sussy specifically for him. He found himself struggling to maintain his composure as he realized he could see far more than he was comfortable with from his current vantage point. He knew she was an outgoing person, but he had always assumed she was a bit shy about showing off like this. The tension in the air became almost unbearable as he tried to finish cleaning the spill, but Sua made it nearly impossible by moving in a way that only added to his embarrassment. She seemed to have a sudden realization of her own and looked at him with wide, startled eyes as a loud crash echoed through the restaurant. Wobbling on her feet, Sua admitted that she must be much drunker than she realized. She announced that she was going to head to the restroom to finish cleaning herself up properly, leaving Min-kook alone at the table to catch his breath. He let out a weary sigh and decided that a little clumsiness was only natural given the circumstances. He told himself he didn't really mind the awkwardness and figured he should go ahead and settle the bill while she was away. Meanwhile, inside the restroom, Sua was having a very spirited conversation with her own reflection. She was incredibly annoyed by her cloth constantly rolling up and felt a wave of frustration that Min-kook hadn't spent the whole night checking her out. She questioned why she had even bothered to involve her sister in their plans that day. Taking a deep breath, she reminded herself that she was currently wearing a very special set of sussy cloth that a friend had recommended specifically to help her win him over for cardio sessions. She felt a surge of determination and told herself that she was capable of doing anything Suna could do. She resolved to make her move, reasoning that if even her mother could handle these intense cardio sessions, there was absolutely no reason why she couldn't do the same with Min-kook. Min-kook found himself supporting a very wobbly Sua as they made their way down the street, realizing that they probably should have called it a night after the first round of drinks. Sua admitted through her dizzy state that she simply could not walk another step, leaving Min-kook to wonder how they were going to get all the way back to the house. Seeing a place nearby, he decided that they had no choice but to stay there for the night, even though he was terrified that someone might get the wrong idea about his intentions. He promised himself that he would just get her settled in a room and make a quick exit to avoid any further misunderstanding. Once they were inside, Sua flopped onto the bed and appeared to drift off into a deep sleep, giving Min-kook a moment to reflect on everything that had happened between them. He stood over her and quietly admitted that he never realized how much his past behavior had hurt her feelings, especially when he was constantly giving in to her sister's demands. He felt a deep sense of regret for leaving her behind so many times and resolved to offer a proper apology once she was sober enough to hear it. He decided he would wait out the rest of the night at a nearby cafe and come back for her in the morning. But as he turned to leave, he failed to notice that Sua was actually wide awake and watching his every move. She suddenly rose from the bed and confronted him, wanting to know if he planned on abandoning her yet again. Min-kook was completely stunned to see her awake, especially when she began to question why he refused to see her as anything more than just a childhood friend. The atmosphere became incredibly tense as Sua decided to show him that she was just as much of a woman as her older sister, causing Min-kook to worry that she was far more intoxicated than he originally thought. She grew even more emotional as she pointed out that she was almost on the same level as her mother and sister, eventually dropping a bombshell by asking why he had chosen to spend his time doing intense cardio sessions with her mom instead of her. Min-kook felt the world start to spin as he realized that his sussy arrangement with Hae-sun had been discovered, and he began to wonder if Sun-ah knew about it as well. In the middle of his panicked confusion, his feet suddenly failed him, and he ended up slipping and falling right on top of her. Sua didn't seem to mind the proximity, but she continued to press him about the cardio sounds she had heard coming from her mother's room just a few days ago. Sua continued her emotional confession by admitting that she had been completely paralyzed when she first heard those sussy sounds coming from her mother's room. In her state of total shock, she had reached out to her sister Suna for guidance, thinking she might have some insight into the situation. However, she now found herself drowning in regret because she was terrified that her sister would use that information to take Min-kook away from her. She begged him to consider her feelings and promised to keep his secret rehearsals with her mother a total mystery as long as he stayed by her side instead of her sister's. Min-kook remained in a state of frozen embarrassment, his mind drifting back to the many times he had let Sua down during their childhood. He recalled how his own indecisive nature had caused her so much heartache, specifically remembering the times she had tried to win his attention with her favorite snacks, only for him to be dragged away by her sister. He realized that he had been the target of Sun-ah's bossy personality for years, and felt a deep sense of shame for never having the courage to stand up to her. As he looked at the vulnerable girl before him, he wondered if it was truly ethical to let the situation progress, while they were both so clearly under the influence of the night's drinks. He worried that he might just be playing with her emotions to protect his own secrets, which made him feel like a less than honorable man. When he finally tried to suggest that they were both far too drunk to be having such a serious conversation, Sua took things a step further by threatening to tell Suna everything if he tried to walk out on her. She lamented that her sister and Min-kook would probably make a perfect partnership anyway, and expressed her frustration at having involved her sister in the first place. Min-kook eventually decided that the only way to handle the mounting pressure was to take a cold shower and try to clear his head before making any more mistakes. He urged her to just get some rest and pretend that this entire evening had never happened, though he found it increasingly difficult to keep his cool as he noticed the specific details of the outfit she had chosen to wear. While he retreated to the bathroom to wash away the stress of the encounter, he felt a small sense of relief that Suna was still largely unaware of the most sussy details of his new life. He stood under the water, wondering what his next move should be, while completely unaware of the drama unfolding back at the family residence. Back at the house, Suna had just discovered a mysterious book that made her feel as though she had hit the absolute jackpot of family secrets. As she began to flip through the pages, she was hit with a massive realization when she noticed that the handwriting throughout the text belonged to her mother rather than her sister. She quickly connected the dots and realized that there was a much bigger story happening behind her back, and that Sua had been keeping the most interesting parts of the truth to herself. With a very confident and slightly sussy grin, she decided that it was finally time to teach someone a lesson about what happens when they try to hide things from the most observant member of the household. Later, the morning light hit the building sign as the two made their way out, both feeling the heavy weight of an incredibly awkward silence. Min-kook suggested that they probably needed to have a real conversation about everything that had transpired during their long night out. He awkwardly asked if she would be willing to sit down and talk in a more neutral setting, like a nearby park. They eventually found their way to a quiet bench where the fresh air finally helped clear away the lingering effects of the alcohol. Min-kook took a deep breath and began to explain the entire situation involving her mother and that mysterious script she had discovered. He clarified that the sounds she heard were all part of a very specific and intense rehearsal process for a cardio film production. He revealed that Hae-sun had a secret childhood dream of becoming a professional voice actor and that she was currently practicing for her final audition. He admitted that he had agreed to be her partner because he felt a deep sense of gratitude for the way she had raised him like family and supported him after his military discharge. Sua listened intently and realized that she had perhaps been a bit too quick to make wild assumptions about the situation. She noted that her mother had truly gone through a lot of hardships after her divorce and deserved a chance to finally chase her hidden ambitions. However, she made it very clear that she had some very specific conditions if they were going to move forward together. She told him that once her mother finally managed to make her professional debut as an actress, the private practice cardio sessions between them would have to come to a permanent end. Min-kook looked at her and felt a wave of genuine affection. Remembering all the times he had hurt her feelings during their childhood, he recalled his own past indecisiveness and how he had often let her sister Suna drag him away, leaving a younger Sua in tears. He thought about how she used to give him her favorite snacks just to keep him by her side, and decided that he no longer wanted to be the reason for her sadness. He realized that he should have had the confidence to stand up to Suna and protect Sua's feelings a long time ago. The atmosphere became much warmer as they made their way back to the privacy of their room. Min-kook found himself completely captivated by her and admitted to himself that she was just as kind-hearted and beautiful as her mother. He realized that she wasn't just a childhood friend anymore, but someone he truly cherished and wanted to be with. He eventually decided to head into the bathroom to wash up, noting that he needed to have a clear head before they continued their conversation. While he stood under the shower, Min-kook felt a small sense of relief that the truth was finally out in the open and that Sua seemed supportive of her mother's dream. He found it a bit humorous that they were now in a situation where she was the one being bold, while he was the one feeling incredibly shy. As things began to mix up again between them back in the main room, Min-kook tried to remain the voice of reason by noting how close they were to the door. However, his own resolve was quickly fading as Sua showed him exactly how much she liked him, making it very clear that they were about to start a very intense cardio session of their own. The story continues with the aftermath of an incredibly intense cardio session between Min-kook and Sua. They both find themselves completely spent, with legs shaking so much they can barely stand. The exertion leaves them feeling as though they might actually melt into the floor at any moment. As they recover from the workout, Sua feels a deep sense of connection and concludes that their cardio compatibility must mean they are a perfect match. The scene shifts to later that evening as Min-kook walks through the city streets with Sun-ah. They are casually discussing a local cat that recently had a kitten and how a famous streamer decided to adopt both of them. The lighthearted conversation comes to a sudden halt when Sun-ah stops and looks at Min-kook with a very sussy expression. She wonders why he looks so surprised to see her and if there is some secret reason why he should be avoiding her gaze. She admits that she was originally planning to give him a bit of a hard time, but decided she would rather hear what kind of excuse he could come up with for his behavior. They eventually transition to a car where Min-kook takes the driver's seat. The atmosphere is thick with a heavy and awkward silence as Sun-ah refuses to speak to him at all. Min-kook is left feeling incredibly anxious while wondering what exactly his job description as a manager is supposed to be. He recalls his father's advice about how letting a girl win is often the best strategy and decides he needs to be the one to break the ice. He tries to lift the mood by talking about his driving experience, mentioning that his father taught him how to drive a truck right before he joined the military. He attempts to engage her by asking who taught her how to drive, but Suna is not interested in his stories. She tells him to stop trying to fix her mood and demands that he simply concentrate on the road ahead. Min-kook realizes that he may never truly understand what goes on in a woman's head as they arrive at a large industrial building. Inside, the production schedule is very tight and the crew is busy setting up for a professional photo shoot. Sun-ah is scheduled for various poses involving sussy clothes, and she urges everyone to stay focused so they do not have to stay late into the night. Min-kook stands on the sidelines, feeling a bit lost since he has received absolutely no instructions from his new employer. He watches Sun-ah work and is genuinely impressed by her professional demeanor. She follows every command from the director with ease, switching between poses and showing off a very proud look for the camera. Min-kook realizes that she is a true professional and feels that he should find some way to be useful, even if she has not given him a specific task. He remembers that there are props, shopping bags in the back of the car, and decides the best course of action is to move them into the waiting room. He tells himself to stay calm and take things one step at a time to avoid making any mistakes. However, his caution fails him when he reaches the waiting room and forgets to knock before entering. He bursts inside only to find Suna in an incredibly sussy state as she uses a towel to wipe away the oil from the photo shoot. She is startled by his sudden appearance and tells him that in any other situation, he would have been reported for such a lack of boundaries. Min-kook is completely mortified and struggles to understand why she is currently wearing a sussy cardio cloth in a semi-public space. Sun-ah remains remarkably calm and explains that since she was covered in oil from the shoot, she obviously had to clean herself up properly. She takes the bags from him and admits that while his initiative to bring them was not bad, he really should have waited for her to tell him what to do instead of rushing into things. Suna is feeling quite satisfied as she sits in the dressing room, telling Min-kook that he finally has a chance to prove his worth by helping her wipe the oil off her body. She insists that a manager should be ready for any task. Min-kook is visibly distressed by her words and begs her to stop talking such nonsense while he slams the shopping bags onto the desk in a fit of nerves. Suna finds his sudden temper quite interesting and notes that he seems much manlier ever since he started spending time with her sister. As Min-kook diligently works on cleaning her legs with a towel, Suna realizes that her earlier frustration was not actually directed at him but at Sua instead. She even begins to entertain the sussy idea of making her sister lose interest in him altogether just to see what happens. Eventually, Suna grows tired of his constant questions about what he should be doing next. She calls him a nuisance for whining and reminds him that he was pretty much out of options before she offered him this position. She hands him a wallet containing a credit card for work expenses along with his phone and a professional business card. She tells him that being her manager is a great privilege and that he should start acting like a man and fulfill his duties with confidence. After the long photo shoot finally wraps up under the dark night sky, Min-kook arrives with a refreshing iced coffee to help her power through the exhaustion. Suna appreciates the gesture and comments that his military training must have taught him how to be a diligent worker. When Min-kook eagerly suggests taking her home so she can rest, Sun-ah decides that she is not quite ready to end the night and suggests they head out for a drink instead. Min-kook finds himself in a high-end bar for the very first time, and he cannot help but look around in total wonder at the fancy rows of bottles and the sophisticated atmosphere. Sun-ah notices his wide-eyed reaction and teases him about his obvious lack of experience in such places. She reminds him that as her manager, he will be spending a lot of time in bars like this, so he better start acting like he belongs. Min-kook is already feeling plenty of nerves, but Suna decides to turn up the conversation by suggesting they play a little betting game to make the night more interesting. She explains the rules of what she calls the jackpot drinking game, which involves a series of 7 questions. If Min-kook can answer her questions right away, she has to take a drink, but if he hesitates or fails to answer, he must drink instead. To make the stakes even more intense, she adds a very sussy rule that she will obviously install one piece of her clothing for every question asked. Min-kook is completely shocked and wonders if they can just play a normal game without all the sussy drama, but Suna completely ignores his protests and moves right into the first round. She starts by asking why he didn't run away earlier in the day, despite her constant testing and difficult attitude. Min-kook lets out a sigh and admits that it actually felt good to finally get some work done after being unemployed for so long. Sun-ah accepts this honest answer and takes her first shot while Min-kook feels a temporary wave of relief. He starts to think this might just be a standard game after all, but he quickly realizes he was mistaken. For the second question, Sun-ah leans in with a sussy grin and asks if he found her body cardio compatible when he accidentally walked into the waiting room. Min-kook tries to play it safe by giving a very professional answer about how she clearly has the body of a top gym model freak. Suna finds this response incredibly boring and accuses him of being a liar. To punish him for his dull answer and to turn things up, she dramatically installs her stockings right there at the bar. Min-kook is absolutely flustered by the sudden turn of events and watches as she orders another strong drink from the bartender. He realizes that things are getting out of hand and decides that his only hope is to win the game so he can ask her for a massive favor in return. He tries to steel his resolve and prepare for whatever comes next, but Suna is always one step ahead. She drops a total bombshell for the third question by asking if he spent his time with a woman the day before. Min-kook's heart begins to hammer against his ribs as he wonders if she has already discovered his secret cardio sessions with her sister Sua. He is left in a state of total panic, realizing that if he cannot find a way to answer this question truthfully, the consequences will be far more sussy than he is prepared to handle. Min-kook is currently spiraling into a deep pit of worry as he considers the possibility that Sua might have shared the details of their cardio encounter with her sister. He decides that the only way to survive the interrogation is to finish his drink, even though the cocktail is far stronger than anything he expected to taste. Suna watches him with a knowing look and notes that he will never want to go back to ordinary drinks once he gets a taste for the finer things in life. She decides to keep her word and wears another piece of clothing, telling him that since her questions are only going to get tougher, she might as well make things more interesting for him. Min-kook is mortified and pleads with her to reignite her sanity before the bartender sees everything, but Suna is far too focused on her own agenda to care about modesty. She moves on to the fourth question by asking if the script he found in his room actually belonged to someone else, and the look on her face tells him that she is enjoying every second of his distress. Min-kook realizes that this is the same mocking expression she used to wear when they were children, and he fears that his silence is giving away every single one of his secrets. Suna grows visibly annoyed as she considers how her mother and sister have already spent so much time with him, and she decides that it is finally time for her to return the favor. She moves from her stool and chooses to sit directly on the bar table, causing Min-kook to worry about the lack of decorum in such a public place. He starts to feel a strange dizziness taking over his mind and wonders how only 2 drinks could leave him feeling so completely disoriented. He slowly realizes that he has fallen right into a carefully constructed trap and has no way to escape the situation. Suna leans in to deliver the 5th question, wanting to know if his rehearsal with her mother was actually a cardio encounter. She calls him an ungrateful person for repaying their family's kindness in such a sussy way while she forces him to take another drink. She finally reveals that the cocktails he has been drinking were specifically designed to lower his inhibitions and make him easier to manage. She admits that she was incredibly frustrated to learn that he had been claimed by her family members before she had her chance. Her ultimate goal is to win the game so she can claim him entirely for herself, ensuring that her mother and sister never get another opportunity to do cardio with him again. The story takes a nostalgic turn as a memory surfaces of a younger Min-kook and Suna standing together on a quiet night. Min-kook was preparing to leave for his hometown after his parents regained their health, but seeing Suna so upset made the departure incredibly difficult. She had reminded him of his promise to stay by her side until she achieved her dream of becoming a model, and he had tried to comfort her by promising to return once he became a big guy. He had given his word that he would help her with anything she needed, eventually sealing the deal with a pinky promise that he would be her manager when she finally became famous. Back in the present, the car ride home is filled with a very different kind of energy, as Suna seems to have completely lost her composure. She offers Min-kook a massive stack of cash as a tip, jokingly telling him to use the money to forget all the sussy things he witnessed at the bar. Min-kook tries to maintain his professional demeanor by claiming he was far too busy driving to notice anything unusual, though he does manage to crack a joke about being available as an escort driver whenever she might need one. Once they arrive back at the residence, Min-kook finds himself slumped on the edge of the bed with his head spinning from the effects of the lady killer cocktails. He realizes that he is far too intoxicated to maintain any sense of control and tries to tell himself to wake up and get a grip. Suna stands before him and delivers a blunt lesson on the art of cardio, noting that when a woman shows off her cardio interests so openly, there should be no doubt about her intentions. She warns him to watch out for other girls and stay focused on her alone while they are together. Min-kook suggests that they should perhaps try starting their new partnership in a more casual and relaxed way, but Suna is not interested in playing it safe. She is visibly annoyed by the realization that her mother and sister have already had their turn doing cardio with him, and she finds it especially frustrating that Sua made their cardio session so incredibly obvious to everyone. She decides that, as the older sister, she simply cannot let them win this competition. She throws all caution to the wind and begins to wear more clothes, declaring that she is going to handle things her own way and ensure that she finally gets the attention she believes she deserves. Later, the morning brings a fresh wave of intensity as Suna takes charge of the situation, noting that it has only been a month since Min-kook was discharged from the military, and he clearly still has a lot to learn about civilian life. She nudges him to get out of bed and head straight for the shower, bluntly pointing out that he currently smells like a mixture of late-night drinks and cardio exertion. Min-kook finds himself under the spray of the water, trying to wrap his head around the sheer complexity of his new living arrangement. He realizes with a heavy sigh that he is now engaged in cardio sessions with the stepmom and both of her daughters, a realization that makes his head spin more than the alcohol ever could. He worries about the mounting pressure of having both sisters harboring deep crushes on him, especially since they both seem to know exactly what has been going on behind closed doors with their mother. He fears that this web of secrets is eventually going to be used as leverage against him, leaving him in a very sussy position within the household. As he steps out of the bathroom, he is immediately confronted by Suna, who is already in a playful mood, yanking at his towel and teasing him about how long he took to get ready. The sound of the doorbell interrupts the awkward moment, and Suna mentions that she ordered some soup for them to share, even though she was originally hoping for some morning cardio instead. Min-kook is momentarily confused about how a delivery person could have the access codes to the building, but his thoughts are cut short by a sudden and dramatic entrance. Sua walks into the room and freezes at the sight of the two of them in such a sussy position. The atmosphere becomes incredibly tense as Sua begins to tremble, with a mixture of shock and betrayal, wondering how her own sister could do something like this to her. She feels as though everything she values is being taken away, and is heartbroken to find Suna claiming Min-kook for herself so boldly. Suna, however, is not in the mood for sisterly comfort and mocks Sua for always crying whenever things do not go her way. She declares that a formal race for Min-kook's affections has officially begun and that tears are not going to help anyone win. To prove her dominance, Suna begins to demonstrate her absolute commitment to their new partnership by showing off a specific set of cardio accessories designed to ensure she is ready for the most intensive cardio sessions at any given moment. She boasts that her experimental approach is far superior to anything Sua could offer, and claims that Min-kook will never be satisfied with a boring or traditional cardio arrangement. Again, Sua is pushed to her limit and fires back with insults of her own, calling her sister low and classless, while promising that she can be just as bold if it means keeping Min-kook by her side. Min-kook tries to interject and suggest that they all sit down and talk things through like big people, but he is quickly told to shut up and stay out of the sisterly feud. Sua stands her ground with a newfound sense of confidence, determined to show her sister that she is no longer a little girl. She believes that men generally prefer a bold cardio presence over a feisty attitude, and makes it very clear that her gym body is far superior to anything Suna has to offer. Suna, however, is completely unimpressed by the verbal challenge and notes that there is no point in all this talking when they could simply prove their worth through action. The two sisters find themselves in a standoff, their competitive spirits literally pressing against one another as Suna proposes a shared battle of cardio to finally settle their score once and for all. She mocks Sua by suggesting she might be too scared to handle such an intense arrangement, which only serves to push her younger sister into agreeing to the bizarre challenge. Min-kook lies there in a state of total disbelief, realizing that both sisters have completely lost their sanity under the weight of their rivalry. He feels a deep sense of guilt and worries that he has already done far too much wrong in this household, making him terrified of losing the trust has placed in him. Even as the sisters ignore his pleas for calm and demand that he prepare himself for the upcoming session, a sudden moment of clarity hits him like a bolt of lightning. He realizes that he has landed in a situation he has only ever seen in specific types of films, and decides that he should not be there a single second longer. In a sudden burst of energy, he chooses to make a frantic run for it and dashes out into the streets before they can stop him. Suna watches his retreating figure and concludes that the idea of a triple partnership was simply too much for him to process at once. She playfully notes that he even left his phone behind in his hurry to escape, and decides that they should just enjoy their morning soup before trying to track him down later. Meanwhile, Min-kook arrives at the flower shop gasping for breath and wondering if he should just confess the entire truth before things become even more complicated. He finds Hae-sun working peacefully among the arrangements, and she is genuinely surprised to see him looking so exhausted and covered in sweat. She touches his face with concern and mentions that she expected him to still be with Sua, but she is glad for the opportunity to speak with him in private. She admits that her audition went wonderfully thanks to his previous help and expresses a desire to continue their practice sessions. Min-kook is left feeling a mixture of relief and fresh anxiety as she makes a surprising proposal by asking if he would be willing to go on a special trip with her. Sua and Suna stand outside the residence, realizing that the man of the hour has completely vanished from the premises. Sua laments that they should have checked their mother's flower shop first thing in the morning, while Suna looks as though she is about to lose her patience with the entire situation. As they climb into the car, the tension between the sisters reaches a boiling point, and Suna grows tired of the constant bickering. She decides to end the suspense by asking if Sua is truly aware that their mother has been having her own cardio sessions with Min Cook. This revelation hits like a ton of bricks, confirming that the competition for his attention is a full-blown family partnership. Meanwhile, back in the quiet of his room, Min Cook is busy reflecting on the chaotic events of the past few weeks. He admits to himself that everything has felt like a wild dream that he never wants to wake up from. While he feels a slight twinge of guilt for the sisters and the way he left them, he believes that restoring his relationship with Hae-sun is the most important task on his list. He begins to pack his few belongings into a backpack, realizing that his stay in this household has been short but incredibly eventful. His packing is suddenly interrupted when he discovers a hidden box tucked away in a place he never thought to look. As he peers inside, his eyes go wide with shock at the collection of very sussy cardio accessories that has been keeping secret. He realizes that her dedication to her acting craft and intense cardio training goes far deeper than he ever imagined, and he finds himself wondering how she managed to keep such a vast collection hidden for so long. Back at the shop, the argument between the sisters only intensifies as the morning sun rises higher. Sua is practically yelling into her phone about wanting a vacation and feeling completely left out of the loop regarding the family's travel plans. Suna tells her to just get in the car and stop being so dramatic, though her own expression reveals a grim determination to catch the secret partners red-handed. She explains that there is no room for cooperation when it comes to a man like Min Cook, especially when their mother is playing the same game. She is simply giving the pair enough time to feel safe before she swoops in to expose the truth of their sussy arrangement. In the privacy of the house, Hae-sun is on the phone and sounding deeply concerned about the fact that her daughters are together and clearly fighting. She wonders what could have possibly brought them together at this hour and fears that her sussy life is about to be revealed to the people she loves most. Min Cook approaches her while she is distracted by the call, feeling a sudden surge of confidence after his discovery in the closet. He reaches out, suggesting that he has found something that looks like a lot of fun. He reminds her that she once expressed a desire to learn how to do things on her own without his help, and offers to show her exactly how these new cardio tools work. Then they started an intense practice cardio session. Later, Min Cook suddenly realizes that his phone and wallet are still back at the house, but he finds some comfort in the thought that they are far enough away to avoid being discovered easily. He reflects on his own lack of focus and wonders what his life will look like once he eventually returns from this getaway. Even after his current arrangement with Hae-sun comes to an end, he knows he will still be trapped in a complicated tug-of-war between her two daughters. He realizes that he has not yet gathered the courage to tell Hae-sun that her children are already fully aware of their secret rehearsals. Hae-sun eventually emerges and apologizes for the long delay, admitting that her excitement for the trip made her lose all track of time while she was busy trying on various outfits. She fidgets with her clothes and hopes that her chosen look is appropriate for the occasion. Min Cook can feel his heart hammering against his ribs as he tells her that she looks absolutely wonderful. He notes that her youthful energy makes her seem like a young girl again, and his own excitement begins to mirror hers. They decide to start their day with a stroll through the woods, with Hae-sun mentioning that the local forest is a sight that everyone should experience at least once. She urges him to take his time and soak in the atmosphere, since they have plenty of hours to spend together. Min Cook finds it a bit surreal to be walking with her like this, feeling as though they are real partners on an outing. Hae-sun admires the neatness of the surrounding gardens and gives credit to the local caretaker for doing such a professional job. As they venture deeper into the trees, Min Cook feels his heart continue to race and notes that Hae-sun is not the only one getting worked up by the beautiful scenery. He prepares a mat and sets it up under a large tree, thinking it might be a good place for a little rehearsal she has been wanting to try out. However, their peaceful moment is interrupted when they stumble upon a very unexpected sight. They find another duo engaged in a very intense cardio session right in the middle of the woods. Min Cook tries to laugh off the awkwardness and realizes that the other duo is likely unaware that they are being watched. He begins to worry about the consequences of such a bold display in a public place, but he quickly sees that Hae-sun is having a very different thought. He notices her visible signs of excitement and realizes that watching the other duo is actually fueling her desire to do cardio too. Hae-sun tells him to be quiet and stay calm, but she is clearly ready to start a cardio session of her own. Min Cook tries to suggest that they should head back to their room for some privacy, but his resolve fails as they both trip and land in a heap on the ground. Hae-sun is completely swept up in the sussy nature of the hidden spot and decides that they simply cannot pass up such a sussy opportunity to practice cardio together in the great outdoors. The outdoor rehearsal takes a sudden and very loud turn when a man in a red cap appears out of nowhere and demands that they stop treating the forest like a private playground. He is clearly not interested in their artistic cardio sessions and threatens to call the authorities if they do not leave immediately. Min Cook and Hae-sun are absolutely mortified as they scramble to gather their things and apologize for the public disturbance. They make a frantic dash through the trees while the caretaker watches them with a look of pure disbelief. Once they finally make it back to the safety of their modern cabin, they collapse onto the stairs, gasping for breath and feeling the weight of the humiliation. Min Cook realizes that they will eventually have to face the manager again to order supplies, which makes the situation even more awkward. Hae-sun leans back to catch her breath and admits that the thrill of the secret cardio encounter felt surprisingly good despite the interruption. Min Cook wonders if they are still following the script from the warehouse. Back at the family residence, the peace is shattered by a series of angry shouts as Sun-ah discovers that Min Cook has officially vanished. She slams the door in a fit of temper and declares that her mother and her manager are clearly trying to hide their secret getaway from her. Su-ah watches from the side and worries that her sister is reaching a breaking point that might end badly for everyone involved. Suna is trembling with a mixture of rage and competitive spirit, stating that she is more than ready to play this game, regardless of who her opponent happens to be. Su-ah tries to calm her down, but Sun-ah pulls out her phone to reveal a secret GPS application that she shares with her mother. She explains that the tracker was originally installed to protect Hae-sun from various stalkers who had been harassing her at the flower shop. Suna points out that the signal shows them staying at a nearby cabin only an hour away and offers to share the location if Sua wants to help her crash the party. Sua sighs at her sister's extreme behavior and suggests that they should be more concerned about their mother's well-being instead of worrying about her cardio schedule. Suna reflects on their mother's difficult journey, noting that Hae-sun has been hounded by men ever since her divorce. These persistent strangers would even show up at the flower shop with the sole intention of getting close to her. Despite the constant harassment, she managed to raise 3 children without ever taking a break for herself. Now that her children are grown, she finally feels the need to chase her childhood dream of becoming a professional voice actress. Sun-ah acknowledges that their mother was abandoned by her husband during her final momhood and has spent years dealing with a deep-seated distrust of men. Asking Min Cook for help might not have been the most conventional choice, but it was born out of a sense of desperation to find someone she could actually trust. Su-ah suggests that they should just stay calm and wait for them to return home, since it is never too late to have an argument once everyone is back under one roof. Suna, however, feels as though her sister is being patronizing and clenches the steering wheel with a fresh surge of annoyance. She believes that her mother and Min Cook have officially crossed the line and deserve to be caught in the act. She drives through the quiet streets with a heavy foot, her mind set on reaching the cabin before the night is over. Inside the cabin, Min Cook wakes up from a deep sleep and finds himself greeted by the delicious aroma of a home-cooked meal. He realizes that the nap did him a world of good and starts to stretch as he prepares for the evening ahead. While the roleplay rehearsals have been exciting, he decides that he absolutely needs to have a serious conversation with Hae-sun. He reflects on how much his life has changed in just 1 month, remembering his intense cardio sessions with the stepmom who raised him like family and both of her daughters. He acknowledges that things have become far too complicated and resolves to lay everything out on the table over dinner. However, his plans for a serious talk vanish the moment he steps into the kitchen. He finds Hae-sun busy at the stove, but she is wearing a tiny apron that leaves him completely speechless. Min Cook can only stare in total shock as he tries to process this new level of rehearsal commitment. Hae-sun turns toward him with a beaming smile and asks if he likes her choice of attire, explaining that it is actually a scene from a cardio training video she recently studied for her practice. She promises to put on some proper cardio clothes once the soup is heated, but Min Cook's brain has already reached its limit. Outside, a car pulls up to the cabin and Sun-ah steps out with a look of absolute determination. She is not about to let anyone else claim the prize without a fight and declares that she is ready for some defensive maneuvering. Suna arrives at the resort office and wastes no time, getting straight to business as she asks for the specific room where Min Cook is staying. When the manager explains that giving out guest information is strictly against their privacy policy, Suna decides to take a very creative shortcut through the truth. She coolly declares that she is actually the man's real partner, a statement that sends the manager's brain into a total tailspin. He suddenly finds himself wondering if he is witnessing the beginning of a very messy family drama and begins to suspect that his guests might be having a sussy partnership right under his nose. Despite his internal panic, the manager maintains his professional smile and agrees to lead her to the room personally. Suna follows him with a look of grim determination, while Sua trails behind, desperately trying to be the voice of sanity. Sua wonders what her sister even expects to accomplish by being so irrational, and points out that catching them in the act is only going to result in a very awkward and painful mess for everyone. She asks if Suna is truly prepared to face their mother in such a sussy situation, but Suna is far past the point of worrying about decorum. She believes that whatever the circumstances might be, the betrayal is simply unforgivable, and she is determined to reclaim what she believes belongs to her. Meanwhile, back in the quiet of the room, Min-kook is busy reflecting on how his life has become an absolute whirlwind in just one short month. He thinks back to his intense cardio sessions with the woman, followed by the encounter with his childhood friend, and finally the chaotic morning with her older sister. He admits to himself that things have reached a level of complexity that he never anticipated, and decides that he absolutely must have a heart-to-heart with Hae-sun over dinner to clear the air. He feels that the nap he just took did him a world of good, and prepares to step out of the bedroom to find his host. He hears someone working in the kitchen and assumes Hae-sun is busy, heating up the soup for their meal. He puts on a robe and prepares to head out, but his plans for a serious conversation are interrupted by a sudden knock at the door. He finds the manager standing there, looking a bit sheepish, fumbling for an excuse about a faulty pipe that he forgot to check on earlier in the day. Min-kook finds the timing a bit strange, but tells the man that he will be out as soon as he is fully dressed. Little does he know, Sun-ah is standing just around the corner, watching the scene with a cold and calculating gaze. Min-kook tries to dismiss the manager by suggesting they handle the pipe issue tomorrow morning, feeling a massive wave of relief that the visit has nothing to do with their previous public rehearsal in the woods. His relief is short-lived. However, when a familiar hand reaches out and yanks him into the hallway, he is stunned to find Sun-ah standing there, looking incredibly flustered and demanding to know how he could be so foolish as to elope to a place so close to home. Sun-ah launches into a dramatic tirade, calling him names while questioning if she and her sister mean anything to him at all. She tells him to just go ahead and keep his focus on her mother if that is what he truly wants, all while punctuating her points with a series of playful but frustrated blows to his chest. In a sudden shift of energy, she leans into him and admits that while she really wants to beat the nonsense out of him right then and there, she is afraid it would only make their complicated situation even worse. She hands him his phone and warns him not to lose his belongings like a baby again, telling him that she will be waiting for them to return home because he and her mother both mean the world to her. Min-kook watches her walk away in total silence, marveling at how much more mature Sun-ah has become compared to his own confused state of mind. He feels a deep sense of shame for only thinking about the thrills of their cardio sessions, while Sun-ah was acting for the sake of the entire family. He realizes that he originally came to this cabin to draw a firm line with Hae-sun, and decides that he cannot waste any more time. He knows he has to return to where he truly belongs, but first, he must ensure that Hae-sun is prepared for her future as an actress. Later that evening, as they lounge together in bed, Hae-sun notes that he seems a bit distracted and wonders if the manager had anything negative to say about their afternoon activities. She admits that perhaps rehearsing in the forest was not her best idea, but her thoughts quickly shift to wondering what kind of new cardio positions they should try out during their session tomorrow. Min-kook playfully teases her for being so bold, noting that she seemed to enjoy the intensity of their previous rehearsals just as much as he did. He warns her that he is not going to be easy on her during their final day at the cabin, though he secretly plans to bring in some extra help to ensure she masters her craft. While standing under the warm spray of the shower, Min-kook reflects on how Sun-ah helped him figure out exactly what needs to be done. He understands that simply engaging in more cardio is not going to help him draw a professional line with Hae-sun. Since it is their final day of the trip, he resolves to use every cardio tool at his disposal to help her find her independence. He reaches for a large travel bag filled with a variety of sussy cardio accessories, admitting to himself that he originally packed them without knowing exactly how they would be used. He decides to follow the example of the professional films she studies and use these accessories to help her practice her vocal performance on her own. Later, Min-kook is jolted awake in the middle of the night by a soft voice calling his name and urging him to open his eyes. He realizes he has been dozing off and feels a sudden chill in the air as Hae-sun stands over him. She gently suggests that he should prepare some clothes right away before he ends up catching a cold. Min-kook immediately enters a state of total panic as he realizes the current rehearsal session is officially over and he is still standing there in a sussy position. He frantically tries to cover himself while wondering if his brain has finally reached its limit for the day. Hae-sun remains perfectly calm and turns her gaze toward the beautiful night sky. She mentions how pretty everything looks and invites him to join her for a peaceful walk once he is finished getting dressed. As they step out together, she points out the Milky Way stretching across the horizon, noting that the stars seem much brighter out here, away from the busy city lights. Min-kook finds himself drifting back to a memory of the very first time they engaged in a secret cardio session, recalling how they had looked up at the night sky together back then as well. He remembers how she had opened up to him and shared her deepest thoughts during that quiet evening. Hae-sun decides that since this is the final day of their trip, it is the perfect time to share a story from her past that she has been holding on to for a long time. She admits that she has been quite dependent on him for many years, even back when he was just a young boy who was always trying to be helpful. Min-kook tries to brush off the compliment by suggesting that he was probably just in the way back then, but Hae-sun insists that he was always the most well-behaved child she had ever known. She looks back to the painful moment when her world seemingly came to an end after her husband left the family. He had handed her the house and some money, telling her to stop being so clingy and to simply move on with her own life. Hae-sun felt completely lost and struggled to understand what she had done wrong to deserve such a sudden abandonment. She explains that she did not even have the luxury of being sad because she was the sole provider for 3 children who needed her constant attention. Every day was a cycle of feeding and looking after her kids, forcing her to push her own identity aside to fulfill her duties as a mother. She felt as though she was slowly disappearing until the day she finally met Min-kook. She remembers him arriving at her flower shop while holding his father's hand, looking just as nervous as she felt. His father explained that Min-kook's mother was very sick and needed to go back to the country for treatment, leaving them with no choice but to find him a place to stay in the city so he could continue his education. Hae-sun was originally planning to turn them down because her hands were already full with her own 3 children, and she did not think she could handle any more responsibility. However, her heart melted the moment she saw young Min-kook sitting on the floor teaching Suna and Suna how to play jackstones. Seeing him interact so kindly with her daughters made her blurt out that she would take him in before she could even think about the consequences. She realized that no matter how hard she tried to be everything for her children, there was always a void where a father figure should have been. Back on the lounge chairs at the cabin, Hae-sun explains that he has been like a brother to her children for years. Now that he has grown into a man and even played the partner role for her during their secret cardio sessions, she realizes just how much they all truly need him. She reaches out and expresses her deepest wish for him to stay with the family forever, just like he always was for her timid and clumsy daughter, Suna. Hae-sun continues her reflection on their shared history, noting how Min-kook was always there for her daughters, especially the headstrong Suna, who managed to hide a very soft heart. She wonders if it is even possible for him to go back to being the same person he was before he discovered her sussy script. She even offers to keep her distance for a while, if it makes him feel more comfortable, suggesting that he should just stay close to her daughters, as if nothing sus ever happened between them. Min-kook, however, is not interested in staying away and shows his absolute commitment. He tells her that he is definitely coming back home with her because they are family and he could never imagine being anywhere else. He explains that he finally feels as though he has paid back the debt he owed for the way she raised him on behalf of his parents. Now that the pressure is gone, he is simply happy to have helped her find her hidden dreams again. He thinks back to how miserable he felt right after finishing his military service, remembering his empty wallet and the lack of a place to call home. He spent those lonely days holed up in a cheap inn, feeling completely useless and alone until the family reached out to him. It was Suna who eventually called him back to the house, while Suna filled him with the confidence he needed to stand on his own 2 feet again. This shared journey and their cardio partnership made him feel more alive and happy than he had been in a long time. Even though their method of practice was a bit out of the ordinary, He was proud to have helped her through their intense rehearsals. He found a deep sense of satisfaction in being of service to the people he adores the most, and realized that he wanted even more of this happiness that comes from being with family. As their time at the cabin draws to an end, they both feel much lighter now that so many things are out in the open. Looking up at the stars one last time, they admit they are almost sad to leave such a beautiful place behind. They even talk about bringing the whole family back for a vacation next time, sharing a few playful jokes and a sweet moment together before officially heading back to the city. Upon returning home, life seems to settle back into its familiar rhythm on the surface. It feels as though the sisters have decided to turn a blind eye to the secret getaway for the sake of their mother's happiness. However, reality is far more complicated and secretive than it appears to the outside world. During a professional family photo shoot, the studio is filled with the sound of the sisters bickering over who is being selfish and who needs to move over. Hae-sun tries her best to keep the peace by telling everyone to stop being so difficult, but she is completely unaware of the true nature of the competition happening right in front of her. As the camera prepares to click, Min-kook finds himself caught in a very literal squeeze between the two sisters, realizing that his relationships have become much more Susie than they ever were before.